Hello, I'm Alex from Ani Best Recaps, and I'd love to tell you a story. It starts with Kunon, a young aristocrat from a super high-profile and influential family in the kingdom. From the outside, anyone would think his life is just perfect. But you only have to look at the family sitting around him to realize something is way off. Actually, he's the one who can't look at anything because the kid is totally blind. He carries what they call the hero's scar, meaning from the moment he first opened his eyes in this world, he's known nothing but pitch-black darkness. This, understandably, left him in a deep depression for a long time. His only constant companion is his personal maid, Aiko, who has to lead him by the hand everywhere he goes. Feeling like her master needed a purpose, she decides to encourage him to dive into the world of magic. After all, the little noble has a water magic crest, and it would be a crying shame to just ignore a gift like that. This is where we meet Jenny, the magic tutor who shows up for her first lesson and mentions how good it is to finally meet Kunon in the flesh. They don't waste any time and jump right into the basics, starting with the water ball spell. After carefully explaining how to pull off the incantation, the teacher watches the student give it a shot, and, to her surprise, he manages to manifest a small, watery sphere on his very first try. Jenny is genuinely impressed, and mentions that the boy has a massive aptitude for the mystical arts. But since Kunon can't actually see his own work, he asks her to describe exactly what happened. The tutor explains that he was successful, and that the water ball was roughly the size of an eyeball, but she realizes way too late that it was a terrible choice of words for someone who is blind. She's terrified that she might have offended the kid, but the effect on Kunon is actually the opposite. He just had an epiphany that magic can take the shape of eyes, and if he hits the books and practices enough, he might be able to craft some brand new eyes for himself using his powers. With this fresh hope shining in his chest that he might see one day, the boy gets obsessed with the world around him and decides to learn everything he possibly can. There's a family legend that their ancestor, the hero Hister, defeated the Demon King in the past but lost an arm and a leg in the process. Ever since that fateful day, some of his descendants are born with disabilities, like a missing limb or, in our protagonist's case, his sight. It's a bizarre and cruel situation when you think about how an ancestor's wounds are still being passed down through generations, making the kid suffer right along with him. Kunon might have lost the genetic lottery, but he's decided he won't let that dictate his future anymore. He solemnly swears to find a way to see through magic, though he quickly realizes the road ahead is rough because he runs out of juice and breath after casting just a few simple spells. To manage creating functional eyes, he understands he needs a much stronger and more resilient body. Normally, the fix would be to go out running to build up his cardio, but for someone who can't see, that's just asking for trouble. So, the loyal Aiko suggests he try sword training and mentions she already knows the perfect instructor. The young man spends the next few hours pushing himself to the limit with Master Oro to boost his stamina, and right after that, Jenny shows up to get back to the magic lessons. She notices the sweat and the grind he's putting in with the sword, and even offers him a break, figuring the little guy would be wiped out, but Kunon is dead set on keeping at it. The teacher suggests they review the spell from the previous lesson, expecting to see the same slow progress as any other rookie. But to her total shock, the boy instantly manifests 7 flawless water spheres all at once, something she definitely hadn't taught him yet. Meanwhile, far away at the royal palace, Princess Marika gets word that her carriage is ready to take her to Kunon's place, but she doesn't seem happy about it at all. The two have been betrothed since birth because of the hero's scar, making it a high-stakes political marriage, but the princess is convinced her fiancé doesn't like her. In their past visits, he was always a total downer, and no matter how hard she tried to cheer him up, the kid always said nothing mattered since he was blind and helpless. Even against her will, Marika's maid insists she fulfill her social duty, and the princess finally caves. However, when she meets Kunon this time, she finds a glowing kid who is way happier than in any of their other meetings. Curious, she asks what changed, and he explains that he fell head over heels for magic and that it gave his life meaning again. The young man takes the chance to apologize for being such a bummer in the past and invites his fiancée to hear his stories about all the cool stuff he's been learning. By the end of the day, Marika leaves feeling like she actually had a blast and already starts looking forward to the next visit. Meanwhile, back at her apartment, Jenny is having a full-on nervous breakdown because she has no clue what to teach in the next lesson. She took the job thinking it would be easy money teaching the basics to a kid for years, but Kunon is a prodigy who masters everything in a matter of days. She wonders if she should move on to the intermediate level, but she's scared that more powerful magic might be too dangerous for someone so young and that she could be held responsible if things go south. But since the bills don't pay themselves, she decides she's going to invent some perfectly safe and creative lessons to make sure she keeps getting that paycheck. The next day, the tutor explains that the lesson will be all about customization. Since he's already mastered the shape of the water ball, now he needs to learn to tweak things like temperature, flavor, and color. Kunon quickly grasps that it's not just about making water and floating it, but having total control over the substance. To show him how it's done, she creates 2 spheres, one hot and one cold, and the boy gets the concept instantly. Jenny is left speechless when, after just one short explanation, the student manages to create water that tastes like juice, something she planned on taking weeks to teach. The following day, while Aiko was prepping a drink, she asks her master to heat up some water for her. Kunon does as he's told, but as he's moving the water through the air, something unbelievable happens. He manages to visualize a basket of apples that was sitting right under the path of the spell. The shock is so intense that he loses his focus and drops everything, because that was the first time he'd seen anything in his entire life. He explains to the maid that it's not that his eyes started working again, but that his magic allowed him to identify the shape and color of objects around him. It's a phenomenal breakthrough that puts him very close to his dream. For now, he can only tell basic colors apart, like the red of ripe apples, but he knows he's going to need a ton of practice to understand what each color actually represents. Word travels fast, and Kunon's father is in total shock and joy to hear that his son can now see, even if it's just within a small radius provided by the magic. The boy now spends his time reading books, tracing the colors of the pictures with his fingers, and although he doesn't know how to decode words yet, it's only a matter of time. Later, wanting to impress Jenny, the little guy decides to create a massive sphere of red water in the air. Aiko thinks the color is vibrant and pretty, but when the rest of the family walks into the room, Kunon gets so hyped that he loses control of the magic and ends up soaking himself and the maid in the red liquid. The boy's mother is horrified by the sight because, to an outsider, it looks like her son is covered in blood. Kunon doesn't get the panic, and Aiko has to explain that red is a color that freaks people out because it's the color of human blood, something the boy had never even imagined since he'd never seen it before. Noticing how hard his son is hitting the books, the father decides to call the oldest son, Ixio, to talk about the future. He decides that now that the youngest can handle himself, it's time to send him to school, and that the big brother will be responsible for protecting and looking after him during this time. A little while later, Kunon is called in for an important meeting with his dad and gets nervous, thinking maybe he's in trouble for the red water incident. However, the patriarch reveals that according to the tutors, the boy has already finished practically the entire curriculum required for noble kids, even without ever setting foot in a classroom. The father asks if he's curious about what school life is like, but Kunon honestly answers that he has zero interest, as he's afraid of being a burden to his classmates and prefers to focus on his own magic research goals. The father explains that school is mandatory for the nobility, and that although he managed to get a special pass from the king in the past, now that his son can move around and see with magic, there are no more excuses. The real reason, though, is Princess Marika. If her fiancé simply refuses to go to school, it'll look bad for the princess's reputation in high society. Understanding that his actions reflect on his future wife, Kunon accepts the challenge, even though he thinks it'll be a total waste of time since he already knows all the material. His dad then reassures him, saying he won't have to attend classes like a regular student. He just needs to pass all the advancement exams required for graduation. Since he already crushed the entire syllabus during his private tutoring sessions, the plan was for him to breeze through the tests without any major drama. A little while later, Kunon meets up with Marika to give her the news, and she's absolutely glowing at the idea of spending more time by his side at school. However, the boy shows a bit of concern, imagining that if the princess is with him 24/7, all the other guys who have crushes on her might get jealous and try to take it out on him. Marika tries to say it'll be fine, but her tone wasn't convincing in the slightest, which makes the young man think it might be a good idea to snag a new magic wand for self-defense, just in case things get ugly. On the day of departure, Kunon and Ixio hop into the carriage heading for the academy. To make sure the ride is as smooth as possible, the little genius uses his water magic on the wheels to act like shock absorbers. The older brother is left speechless at the level of control the youngest has reached, but the boy just plays it down, saying he only got a tiny bit stronger. He takes the moment to apologize for all the time he spent drowned in depression, worrying the family, but guarantees that he's now determined to survive no matter what. The problem is that he adds he will triumph even if the rest of the world has to perish for it, which sounds so villainous that Ixio starts worrying about his brother's mental health all over again. When they arrive at school, the noise of dozens of new voices hits Kunon all at once. In the past, he would have done a 180 and bolted, but now he reaches for Marika's hand and asks her to lead him into the building. Near the entrance, they meet Professor Cass, who was assigned to be the boy's guide and proctor. She was feeling pretty apprehensive because she'd heard rumors that the new student was an extremely shy and isolated kid, and she had no idea how to handle someone who refused to socialize. To her surprise, what she finds is a boy chatting away in a super lively and fluid way with the princess and his brother. The bell rings, and Marika and Ixio have to head to their respective classrooms, so the fiancé says her goodbyes, asking Kunon to meet her in the cafeteria for lunch as soon as he's done with the tests. Meanwhile, watching everything from the second floor, Marika's older brother, Prince Lyle, looks down at his sister's happiness with a look of pure contempt. Instead of being a supportive brother, he decides he's going to confront Kunon the moment he gets a chance. Now in the exam room, Professor Cass explains that the boy will have to face 5 tests. Normally, these would be done with days in between, but thanks to an exception made by the king, he'd be taking them all back to back. Kunon apologizes for the trouble, mentioning that his father and the king are basically best friends and likely pulled a few strings to force the school to accept this condition. He starts talking excitedly about the bond between his father and the monarch, but the professor cuts the subject short since she prefers to stay far away from the dirty politics of high society. After the tests are over, Cass goes to the faculty room to grade the papers, thinking she might have to give the boy a little help with his scores since the king was watching. However, the shock was absolute when she realized that Kunon aced every single one of the exams on his own, something that made zero sense for someone who had never stepped foot in a school. Following his success on the exams, the mini-genius meets up with Marika for lunch, but the vibe gets tense when Prince Lyle shows up, just dripping with venom. The princess shows genuine fear since her brother has some violent tendencies, but Kunon, who had no idea who that guy was and didn't care about his title, only noticed that he was making Marika sad. Ixio tries to step in to cool things down, being as diplomatic as possible with the kingdom's 6th prince. But while Lyle was shouting and humiliating the older brother, Kunon was making moves in the shadows. He used his magic to gather water droplets right in the prince's crotch area, and acting totally shocked, shouted for everyone to hear that Prince Lyle had just peed his pants. In that exact moment, everyone in the cafeteria looked at the spot he pointed out, and even with the prince desperately denying it, the wet evidence was undeniable. To avoid further humiliation, he was forced to beat a retreat. Marika and Ixio are relieved, but they know perfectly well that Kunon was the one behind it. The boy just changes the subject and asks what they want to eat. Sitting at the table, the little noble asks why Lyle was making such a fuss, and Marika explains that it's a hierarchy thing. Even though he's the 6th prince and she's the 9th princess, her engagement to a mage who has the hero's scar puts her at a much higher status. Lyle feels threatened by being surpassed by his sister and tries to establish dominance through aggression. Kunon actually wonders if he went too far with the prank, but the others guarantee the prince got exactly what he deserved. Time passes, and back at home, the boy keeps training, now managing to change the texture of ice to mimic real objects, like the skin of an apple. When the day for the final exam arrives and he returns to school, Ixio notices that his brother has been spending a lot of time touching the carriage horses. When asked, Kunon simply replies that he's just gathering samples, leaving his brother confused. At school, there's a goodbye vibe in the air, and Marika reminds her fiancé that they still have the whole day ahead before he leaves for good. Entering the classroom, Kunon is hyped because it's his first time actually being in a room with other students, but he admits he'll miss the one-on-one time with Professor Cass. Ixio notices the two of them have become really close, and the boy reveals he learned a ton about the professor's personal life during the tests. He tells everyone that she only became a teacher because she had a crush on a guy who was going to take the exam for the position, but the guy failed while she passed, and she ended up stuck with a job without knowing what to do. The friends think it's good they get along, but they find it bizarre that an adult is venting about her love life to a child. Just then, a group of other students approaches and asks Ixio and Marika to introduce Kunon, since they never had the chance to talk to him. The little noble introduces himself formally, feeling relieved to discover that his fiancé and brother actually had friends, and weren't complete loners like he'd imagined. To be honest, Kunon was low-key stressing about the fact that nobody had approached him while he was hanging out with Ixio or Marika, to the point where he actually started thinking the two of them had zero friends and were total loners. The princess then explains that her classmates were only keeping their distance because she specifically asked them for some space, since she wanted to enjoy some quality time with her fiancé without any interruptions. The boy breathes a sigh of relief hearing that, because he wouldn't know how to react if he found out his inner circle were social pariahs, even though he admits he doesn't mind being alone or having no friends at all, since that's never really been a burden for him. A little while later, things get serious because the exam is about to start, but Prince Lyle is still out in the hallway, posing like some edgy drama protagonist and staring at the horizon like he's in a movie. His lackeys have to warn him that the test is starting, and even though he tries to act like he's too important to care about exams, his subordinates remind him that he'll end up repeating the year if he skips, which forces him to swallow his pride and enter the room. Inside, our little water genius is busy analyzing the texture of a pigeon near the window when Professor Cass announces that everyone needs to take their seats. Marika had saved a spot right next to her, but before Kunon could take it, Lyle cuts him off and starts staring the boy down with a look of pure hatred. Ixio just watches from the sidelines, unable to step in, remembering how he heard the palace maids gossiping about how the prince is a total screw-up, even though nobody has the guts to say it to his face because of his royal blood. Deep down, Lyle's aggression comes from the fact that he knows that even though people act respectful, they're all probably laughing at him behind his back. In the middle of these tense vibes, Kunon shocks everyone by grabbing the prince's hand and introducing himself formally. The noble freaks out, saying he didn't give permission to be touched, but the boy reminds him that they'll be brothers-in-law soon and that they should get to know each other. He starts feeling the texture of Lyle's hand and comments that, based on the quality of his skin, the prince must have a really handsome face. It was a sincere compliment, but since Lyle rarely receives any kind of genuine affection or validation, he simply doesn't know how to handle it and asks Marika if her fiancé has some kind of mental problem. The scene is so unexpected that the princess bursts out laughing, followed by the rest of the class, and the prince initially thinks the mockery is aimed at him. However, his sister explains that everyone is laughing because it's the first time anyone has ever managed to leave the bully completely speechless and flustered. He tries to deny that he's embarrassed and tells the boy to let go of his hand, but the little guy holds on for a few more seconds just to add that the prince's voice also sounds very strong and commanding. Lyle, who walked in there wanting to humiliate the kid to establish dominance, is now totally lost on how to act mean. Professor Cass finally gets everyone in order and starts the test. By the end of the day, she finishes grading the papers and writes the results on the chalkboard in front of the expectant crowd. To everyone's delight, every student passed and they are all officially graduated. When it's time to head out, Kunon and Ixio hop into the carriage while receiving goodbye waves from their classmates. The little guy comments that he had a blast and even takes one last shot at the professor, saying that if she's still looking for a boyfriend, she should consider Ixio since he's single. The older brother almost dies of embarrassment, and Cass starts to regret opening up about her love life to a child. Whatever the case, that interaction changed something inside Prince Lyle, who decides to make an effort to be a kinder person from then on. A few days pass, and now that he's graduated, Kunon goes back to focusing entirely on new spells. Jenny shows up to test his progress and asks him to create a spinning water ball, split it into 10 parts, and give different colors and textures to each one. The genius pulls it off easily, but warns her that he's figured out how to take customization to an absurd level. With that, he transforms one of the water balls into a perfect dove that starts flying around the room. The tutor can't believe what she just saw and falls to her knees, knowing that not even elite mages can do something that complex with such ease. Later, while they're having tea, Jenny takes a deep breath and says she has something serious to say. In fact, it's been months since she taught him anything new, since her role was only basic magic and, at that point, the student was already a better mage than the teacher. The boy stands up and gives an emotional thank you, saying she was an incredible master and that he loved every one of the desperate little tricks she turned into lessons. He makes it clear that her creative vision gave him a new hope to live and that he values every second of it. Jenny is touched, but explains that the mental effort of coming up with these classes is draining all her energy. The little noble even tries to offer a pay raise through his father, thinking the problem was money, but she confesses it's the opposite. She feels guilty for getting paid so much for doing so little. She admits her brain is bone dry on ideas, and that Kunon deserves a real sorcerer to guide him. After saying goodbye, Jenny leaves the mansion certain that this boy will become one of the greatest mages on the continent, and decides she's going to train twice as hard to try and keep up. The next morning, Kunon gets more bad news from Aiko. His academic tutor, Ms. Flora, also resigned because he's already finished the entire school curriculum. The boy is sad he didn't get to say goodbye, but decides to write a thank you letter. In the middle of this, Aiko even takes the chance to ask him to see if Flora knows any 20-year-old men who want to get married, which makes the boy even more upset. He feels like he's being abandoned by everyone. First Jenny, then Flora, and now even his loyal maid is talking about getting married and leaving. During dinner, he tells his father about Jenny quitting and the need for a new master. Ixio mentions rumors about an extraordinary royal sorcerer named Zanel Finrol, famous for his immense power and also for his hunk-like looks. The mother agrees he'd be the ideal candidate, but the father immediately drops a bucket of cold water on the idea. Since he's a royal sorcerer, Zanel only takes orders from the king or the court, and rarely leaves the castle, making it almost impossible to hire him as a private tutor. Even so, the patriarch promises to talk to the king to see what can be done. Meanwhile, over at the royal castle, the Grand Master of Mages receives a report about a young apprentice who wants to study under one of his subordinates. He initially plans to reject the request on the spot, not caring about the boy's noble connections, But as he opens Kunon's file and starts reading about his feats and his unique condition, he freezes. The master realizes he's not dealing with an ordinary child and that this boy might be the missing piece for something much bigger. It picks up a few days later, with Kunon and his father heading straight to the royal capital because they finally scored a meeting with the royal sorcerer. Honestly, they're both pretty shocked that it even worked, considering almost nobody ever gets an opportunity like this. If things go well, Kunon might just walk away with a legendary tutor. Kunon thanks his dad for pulling strings, but his father clarifies that there was no nepotism involved here. The royal sorcerers simply got curious about the boy after reading his file, though he has no clue why a high-level group would be so interested. To pass the time during the trip, the kid decides to craft a cat out of water, and his control has clearly leveled up since it looks and feels just like a real feline. He hasn't quite figured out how to make it move naturally or meow yet, but his dad is absolutely loving the effort. Once they arrive at the castle, they meet Lady Lesia, and Kunon gives his usual polite greeting. He soon finds out that she's actually the second princess and Mirika's older sister, which makes her his future sister-in-law. Lesia notices the cat the father is carrying and thinks it's adorable, but the second the man puts it down, Kunon cancels the spell, and the animal turns back into a puddle. She's stunned that a child could have that kind of mastery, especially since she had no idea it wasn't a living creature, meaning the boy is way more skilled than she anticipated. She offers to lead him to the Black Tower immediately, but before they head off, the father mentions he has an audience with the king and asks if the boy will be okay getting home by himself. The kid assures him he's perfectly capable of flying solo, so his dad promises to arrange a carriage for later. As Lesia and the young mage walk through the halls, he starts firing off a barrage of questions about advanced magic, but he's talking so fast she can barely keep up. She admits she's still a rookie here, and isn't ready to answer all his deep dives. In this kingdom, there are 10 princesses and 7 princes who usually have to fight for achievements to inherit the throne, but she actually gave up her right to the crown just to chase a career as a sorcerer. While she's worrying that the boy might get sucked into the royal succession drama, she notices he isn't walking anymore. He's sliding. He explains that he just made a thin layer of ice under his feet to kill the friction, and when he asks if she wants to try, she gets super hyped. But before the fun starts, she has to explain the ground rules of the Black Tower. Don't get mixed up in factions, don't sign shady contracts, and don't say anything that'll bite him later. With the boring stuff out of the way, she asks him to turn her shoes into skates. A minute later, the two of them are blasting down the halls like they're at a rink, causing a total scene while guards scramble to catch them. However, they are way too fast. That is, until the night captain Dario spots them. Dario definitely never skips leg day, so he easily chases them down and gives them a massive scolding out in the courtyard. Finally, Kunon is taken to meet Aktard, the Grand Mage, and the kid can tell instantly that this guy is the real deal. Aktard mentions hearing about the boy's water crest, which the kid confirms is on his right shoulder. The Grand Mage takes a look and sees it's a 2-star crest, a classification the boy has never heard of. Aktard explains there are 7 types of crests, the 4 elements plus light, dark, and foul, and they have ranks. 2-star is actually pretty common and near the bottom of the barrel. Lesia mentions she's also a 2-star wind mage, so the kid assumes Aktard must be ranked higher. When asked why, he explains that the magic density around the old man is way higher, comparing the difference to regular cheese versus premium blue cheese. Aktard thinks it's a funny analogy, but tells him never to call him cheese again. He reveals he has a 4-star crest, though he clarifies that a crest rank doesn't measure skill, it just shows the total energy tank someone has. With the lecture over, Aktard takes everyone to the courtyard for the real test. A bunch of royal sorcerers gather to see if the kid is truly as amazing as the rumors say. Aktard calls over a mage named Vict to start the trial, and Vict conjures dozens of water balls around himself. The challenge is simple. The boy has to use his own magic to overcome Vict's spell. The kid is a bit stunned because he never even thought about trying to hijack someone else's magic. He remembers his old tutor Jenny saying magic lets you create or control water, so he decides to give it a shot. He starts a magical tug-of-war with Vict, and while it's way harder than he thought, he manages to snatch 2 of the water balls. He feels disappointed, thinking he failed, but the pros tell him he actually killed it. Vict didn't expect him to take even 1, so grabbing 2 exceeded everyone's expectations. Actard is having a blast now and wants to see more. A few minutes later, the boy creates a massive water balloon on the grass, and the Grand Master starts bouncing up and down on it like a kid. The young mage starts wondering if it's really okay for the top guy in the kingdom to be goofing off like this on the clock. He explains it's just a tweaked water ball with extreme elastic properties, and he even offers to make it strong enough to launch the old man to the second floor, but Actard decides he's had enough bouncing for one day. Lesya then asks if he can make water humans, and he demonstrates by making a doll of his maid, Aiko. He admits he hasn't figured out natural movement yet, and when he makes it fly, it looks pretty creepy. The group wants to see it anyway, so he sends the Aiko doll flying through the air. Unfortunately, a few maids see it through a window and mistake it for a ghost, which leads to total chaos and the knights being called in. The knights start screaming at the sorcerers for causing trouble, and everyone tries to blame poor Vict. The kid feels pretty down since he managed to get scolded twice on his very first day. Actard tells him not to sulk and suggests they discuss magic over lunch next time, confirming that he passed the test. He promises to personally assign a royal sorcerer as the boy's teacher, which makes the kid ecstatic. He's worried about appearing to support a royal faction, but Lesya reassures him that these sorcerers stay out of politics. Before he leaves, Actard asks what his ultimate goal is, and the boy explains he's studying magic to one day craft new eyeballs for himself. Everyone finds the dream noble and backs him up. However, as he's heading out, he finds his father waiting with a look that says he's in big trouble. The man heard about the two scoldings and wants an explanation immediately. Lesya tries to take the fall, saying she encouraged the mischief, but the father shuts that down. He gives a heavy lecture on responsibility. A sorcerer is always responsible for their magic. Someone with the power to kill thousands can't use the just following orders excuse, and if an order leads to people getting hurt, you have to refuse it. The boy realizes his dad is right and apologizes. The father heads home, but the kid stays behind for dinner with Mirika. Lesya realizes he's late and suggests they use her wind magic to fly over to the other wing so he doesn't arrive all sweaty from running. They use a water balloon as a platform and blast off into the sky. It's an exhilarating ride, but Lesya forgot one tiny detail: how to land. They end up crash landing right in front of Dario again. The captain looks absolutely fed up as he starts scolding them for the third time while Mirika is still getting ready. Some time passes, and Mirika is finally informed that Kunon has arrived, which sends the girl sprinting to the front door so they can get their date started immediately. A little while later, the couple arrives at the planned restaurant, and, once they are seated, she asks her fiancé to tell her every single detail about his day at the famous Black Tower. The young aristocrat reports that he had a wonderful time there, mentioning that he met her sister and several other elite mages who frequent the place. Our protagonist also mentions that he passed the test and will finally have an official instructor, although he still doesn't know who was chosen for the role. The maid in charge of them notices that Kunon is talking up a storm, while Mirika just listens in silence. But since the princess looks radiant with happiness, she concludes it's not a problem at all. The reason for so much chatter is that the boy feels he doesn't get to see his fiancée often now that they have both graduated, so he wants to catch up and say everything he feels while he has the chance. He even makes a solemn promise that as soon as they get married, he will make sure they spend all the time in the world together, exactly the way she wants. That romantic declaration makes Mirika's heart race so much that even after the date is over, she spends the next few hours in her room kicking her feet in pure joy and excitement. Later on, we see Kunon back at his home, concentrated on writing a report in his chambers, but he is interrupted by Aiko, who calls out to him for a little help with magic. The young man heads outside to see what she wants, and the loyal maid asks him to create some magical soap bubbles so she can wash the clothes more efficiently. The master agrees to help, but shows a slight irritation at having to pause his report writing to do this. However, Aiko gives him a lecture, saying it's not healthy to stay cooped up in his room all day, because without sunlight he will never be able to grow taller. The boy questions if girls really prefer taller guys, and she responds that most do, but guarantees she will always like him, no matter if he becomes a giant or remains a legendary tiny boss. After they finish with the laundry, the two lie on the grass for a while, and Kunon asks if any mail arrived for him today. But the girl informs him that as far as she knows, there hasn't been any letter addressed to him recently. She asks if he is expecting something specific, and the young man admits he is anxious for the tower's confirmation about who his new instructor will be, realizing they are taking their time to decide. Well, technically the decision has already been made. But the problem is that the other mages are terrified of going to the man's room to call him. Eventually, one of the mages gathers some courage and goes to Xion's quarters to warn him that the Grand Master has a task for him, but what he finds is a mountain of messy papers and an extremely cranky man. When Xion finally gets up, he threatens his colleague for daring to disturb his precious sleep time. He asks what the man wants, and upon hearing that the Grand Master wishes to speak to him, the legendary mage's interest is finally sparked. A few days later, Kunon receives the long-awaited letter informing him that a teacher has been assigned, and Aiko is euphoric for her master. Upon discovering that the tutor will be none other than Xion, the legendary mage known throughout the kingdom, the maid can hardly believe their luck. All the women in the kingdom would practically sell their souls for a chance to meet this man, and since he will be her master's teacher, that means she will have infinite chances to talk to the heartthrob. Later on, we see Raisha and Marika together in the royal castle on their way to a meeting with Xion, because by the rules, a royal sorcerer still needs a direct order from royalty to be able to leave the facilities. Their plan is to order Xion to act as Marika's bodyguard, which serves as the perfect excuse for the princess to visit her fiancé, although Raisha is still feeling bitter and salty for not being the one chosen to teach Kunon. On the way, the princess ends up running into two of her older sisters, Everil and Lydalia, and it's clear the relationship between them is terrible. The two start spreading venom, commenting on how talented and amazing Kunon is while calling Marika a mediocre loser who is just hitching a ride on her fiancé's glory. Raisha interrupts the malice and tells the two to get out of the way if they don't have anything important to say. The sisters are furious, but since they know they can't go head-to-head with Raisha, they flee from there. Later that day, Kunon is in his garden awaiting the arrival of Xion and Marika with Aiko, and as soon as the carriage stops, he stands up to receive them. He wasn't expecting his fiancée to come today, but he is very happy because it's always a pleasure to be with her. However, while he chats excitedly with the princess, Xion steps down from the vehicle, and the boy goes completely silent the instant the man enters his magic detection range. As for Aiko, she is having a full-on internal fangirl moment seeing her idol, but tries to keep her composure so as not to embarrass herself in front of everyone. The magical energy Kunon feels coming from Xion is absurdly dense, and he realizes on the spot that the guy is on a level far above any other royal mage he met in the capital. Marika notices her fiancé's sudden silence and asks if something is wrong, but he brushes it off saying it's nothing. He introduces himself to the new master, but Xion makes it very clear that he didn't want to be there at all. He explains that he only accepted the invitation because the Grand Master promised there was an interesting young mage at the site, although he seriously doubts the boy can live up to his expectations. At that, Dario speaks up and formally introduces himself as the knight sent to protect the princess and the mage during the trip. Kunon comments that it's good to see him again, which leaves Marika surprised for not knowing they already knew each other. The boy then explains that Dario is the knight who gave him and Raisha a lecture 3 times during the last visit, but recognizes that the man was just doing his duty. Anyway, a few minutes later, the 3 sit at a table in the garden and, at first, the little noble ignores Xion completely to focus on the conversation with Marika. The legendary master soon loses patience with watching the two of them flirt, slams the table, and demands that Kunon start talking about magic at once. He tries to humiliate the student by asking complex questions to show how insignificant the boy's knowledge is, but our protagonist seems ready for any challenge. Xion asks if he knows about compound spells, and the young man explains that they are spells created by splitting and rearranging the original magic circle to obtain new effects. The teacher questions how many sections the student can currently divide a spell into, expecting to hear something between 5 or 10. But Kunon reveals that he can handle 31 different sections at the same time, sometimes reaching 32. Although the success rate at that level is still unstable, the master is genuinely surprised by such complexity and begins to understand the Grand Master's interest in the boy, but still makes a point of showing himself superior. He proudly announces that he can reach 50 sections, and the student is marveled, not understanding how such a feat is possible. Before they proceed, Xion asks how the boy managed to pass the barrier of 20 sections, since most mages get stuck exactly at that point. The protagonist explains that it was easy to overcome that limit once he started working with the layering of spells. The tutor is impressed that he discovered such an advanced concept on his own and understands why the other mages were fighting to teach him, since such talent is extremely rare, but he still wants to test the prodigy's limits. The little one begs to see what a 50-layered spell looks like, but Zeon says it makes no sense to show something the boy couldn't replicate seeing only once. Besides, he hasn't officially accepted Kunon as a student yet, so the boy still needs to prove his worth. The teacher creates an earth wall using magic and warns that the student will need to destroy it using only his mystical powers if he wants to be accepted. He also mentions that he heard Risha talk about the waterbed spell, so he asks the boy to make one for him so he can rest while the test takes place. Initially, Zeon thought it would just be a comfortable seat to observe the pupil's progress from, but as soon as he touches the aquatic surface, he passes out instantly because it is so comfortable. Aiko comments that she doesn't blame him, because the same thing happened to her the first time. On Kunon's end, he begins to inspect the rock wall for any structural flaws, but realizes the construction is solid as stone and perfectly smooth. It is also impregnated with Zeon's dense magic to maintain rigidity for a long time. He notices that the spell used on the wall has more than 40 sections and keeps pondering how the master manages such a feat, but decides that it doesn't matter because he already knows the perfect way to bring down the obstacle. However, he prefers to perform the feat with the tutor watching, so he sits back down and continues talking to Marika until the man wakes up. 2 hours later, Zeon finally awakens from his nap and, seeing the wall intact, asks if the boy gave up on trying to destroy it. The little one responds that's not the case and that he simply hadn't started yet. He asks if the master is ready, and after confirmation, the boy conjures the same bubble spell he used in the laundry earlier. The teacher is impressed to realize the strategy and asks how he arrived at this solution. The protagonist explains that although it is a resistant earth wall, it is still made of dirt, so he deduced that if he covered it with enough water, it would become saturated and end up being washed away by the current on its own. Zeon praises the student's performance, highlighting that most people would try to use brute force in a test like this, but Kunon chose to use finesse and intelligence, which is a valuable skill for a mage. He declared that from now on the boy is officially his disciple, and the boy is happy to have an amazing master and Marika by his side. However, the tutor cuts the romantic mood and warns that he will no longer have time for flirting, as he will have thousands of things to learn and infinite research to conduct. Taking the cue, the master questions the princess about what she plans to do in the future. He points out that Kunon has exceptional talent and that it is only a matter of time before he becomes one of the most influential people in the kingdom, and that, when that happens, there will be no shortage of women interested in him. He asks then how Marika intends to stand out and stay by his side in that scenario. The girl understands the weight of the words, but the fiancé immediately comes to her defense and tells Zeon to stop being so rude. The teacher says he had no intention of being mean, and that he is actually rooting for her. But the little one insists there are things that should not be said that way. He completes by saying that, by the way Zeon acts, he wouldn't be surprised if he had been gross to some girl he loved in the past and ended up losing her to someone else because of it. Those words hit the legendary master right in the target, but he doesn't admit the blow and just yells at the student to shut his mouth. Later that night, Marika returns home and reflects seriously on what she heard, and she puts it in her head that if Kunon is going to become a great person in the future, she also needs to evolve and become worthy of being his partner. A few days pass, and we see Zeon and Marika heading back to Kunon's place for another lesson, and the kid is so hyped he can barely keep his cool. But instead of hitting the training grounds, Zeon has a different plan for the day. He drags the boy into an empty office and just dumps a massive pile of documents on the table for him to sort through. Technically, this is Zeon's actual job, but he is way too lazy to deal with it, so he tells the young mage he needs to finish the whole stack by sunset while he requests another waterbed so he can catch some Z's in the meantime. Since the protagonist is going to be buried in paperwork all day, Marika realizes she won't get a second of his time, so Aiko offers to brew her a cup of tea while she waits. The princess politely declines the drink and reveals she actually has a massive favor to ask of the maid. She wants to use her free time to practice her swordsmanship while she's visiting, but she makes the woman promise to keep it a total secret from her fiancé because she doesn't want him to see her skills until she is strong enough to be truly worthy of standing by his side. While the girl is outside putting in the work, Kunon is struggling with the paperwork because Zeon's handwriting is so bad, it basically looks like he's a doctor or a toddler trying to scribble with a pen. Eventually, the lazy mentor wakes up and asks if the job is done, only to find out the boy is only halfway through the pile. Zeon tries to call him slow, but the kid fires back and says he would have been finished ages ago if the handwriting didn't look like complete chicken scratch. Half the theories are so unreadable that the young noble has been forced to figure out the logic on his own, just to rewrite them in a way that actually makes sense. The master can't really deny his writing is a mess, but he claims this is actually a brilliant part of the training because there is a huge gap between just having information and having actual knowledge. He argues that if the writing were clear, the boy would just be reading. But since it's a disaster, he has to decipher the theories himself, which makes him way more likely to remember the concepts forever. It's a classic bad teacher move that actually sounds pretty smart, so the student thanks him for the lesson, even though we all know Zeon is just pawning off his chores. As the day ends and the guests prepare to leave, the boy mentions a specific spell diagram he saw in the papers and asks what it's for. Zeon decides it's better to show him rather than explain it there, so he invites the boy to visit the Black Tower for their next session. A few days later, the prodigy arrives at the Black Tower, and the royal sorcerers are genuinely stoked to see him again. They are all eager to see some more high-level magic, but Zeon shuts down the party and tells everyone to back off because his student is there for him and nobody else. He leads the way to his office, but Risha and the other mages try to block them because they think it's way too dangerous for a kid to step into Zeon's personal space. The master already has the perfect counterplay ready and tells the boy to manifest a few waterbeds. The sorcerers can't resist the comfort, and they all fall into a deep sleep in seconds. As they walk toward the office, Zeon starts a lecture about magic tools, which are items designed to run on mana like the lamps in the hallway. He explains that many magic engineers spend their whole lives trying to solve everyday problems with these tools. They finally reach the room, which is overflowing with research papers and theories the boy has never even heard of. Zeon tells him he can read whatever he wants, but the real reason for the visit is a special project. The mentor has been working on a tool that allows him to have hot meals in his room so he doesn't have to walk all the way to the cafeteria. He has the solid parts down, but the soft internal sections have been a nightmare to perfect, which is exactly where the water mage comes in. The boy is happy to help with the development as part of his training, but the session is interrupted when the Grand Master walks in. The top boss wants to take the kid to lunch, but Zeon isn't about to waste time on small talk, so he has the boy conjure another waterbed, and the Grand Master is knocked out by the comfort just like everyone else. Once the adults wake up from their naps, they all head down to the cafeteria for a meal, and the other mages start shamelessly trying to recruit the kid to their own teams. They tell him he's allowed to switch teachers whenever he wants, but he stays loyal and says he's happy with Zeon, which makes everyone else incredibly jealous. The boy keeps praising his teacher, but the master tells him to cool it because he's probably going to get jumped in a parking lot if the others get any more envious. The conversation shifts, and the young noble asks where Marika is because he wants to have tea before he leaves. Risha tells him she's at the entrance ceremony for the senior school for nobles today, so she won't be around. The boy knew she was pursuing higher education, but he didn't realize it had already started. The Grand Master then asks the kid about his own plans, and while the boy hates the idea of sitting in a classroom, he says he'll just take the graduation exam whenever it's necessary. The boss suggests he should actually attend the Magic Academy, because a talent like his would thrive there. The protagonist had never even heard of the school, so the Grand Master explains it's the elite institution where royal sorcerers and mages from all over the world go to master the craft. You have to be 12 to join, so he's still 2 years away, but even Zeon agrees it's a solid move. 2 years fly by in a flash and the training goes perfectly. The boy can now cast spells with 55 sections that are on par with his master's power, making him a truly formidable mage. After their session, the whole crew enjoys some piping hot pie from the now finished magic lunchbox. The tool is a massive hit across the kingdom, but the boy is a little salty because his teacher took all the royalties even though they did the work together. In total, the duo has collaborated on 8 magic tools and 5 research papers, and the student is hungry for more. But out of nowhere, Zeon says he's going to handle the rest of the research on his own. The boy reminds him they still need to finish the insect trapping device, but the mentor insists he can do it solo, giving off the vibe that he's trying to push the student away. He reminds the kid that his 12th birthday is coming up, which means he can finally join the Magic Academy. The young mage doesn't want to leave his master's side, but Zeon tells him that as an earth mage, there are things about water magic he simply can't teach him. He argues that at the academy, the boy might meet a water mage even better than anyone in the kingdom of Hylia. The student knows he's right, but he's still terrified of leaving home. Suddenly, Marika grabs his hand and gives him the push he needs, promising that by the time he returns, she will have become a woman worthy of standing by him. He is touched by her sincerity and agrees to go, but then he finds out the school is incredibly far away and almost backs out again. After being persuaded one more time, he realizes he won't be back for a long while and asks how to prepare. Zeon tells him never to lose sight of what is truly important, which reminds the boy of why he started this journey in the first place, to create a set of eyes. He realized he had grown complacent because his magic was so strong it made life easy, but it was never a real substitute for sight. Over the last 2 years, he learned techniques like 3-dimensional magic circles and imaginary magic code, but even Zeon has never heard of using magic to build eyeballs. The master is sure the boy will figure it out, calling him his beloved student. Back at home, the protagonist goes into full research mode, first trying to make a water ball that acts like a mirror. It works as a reflection, but the images don't transmit to his brain, making it useless unless he finds a way to link the feed to his mind. He tries endless variations all day until he's completely drained. To clear his head, he goes to Ixio's room and asks if he wants to hit the sauna. His brother is stoked because everyone loves the boy's special sauna treatments, and they end up waking up the whole family because they wouldn't want to miss out. As the steam fills the room, the brother asks why he's up so late, and the boy admits he hit a wall with his biggest project. The family knows he's talking about the eyes, and while they can't help with the magic, they tell him they are always there for a break. The next morning, the boy thinks about how kind his family is and decides the first thing he wants to see when he gets his eyes is the faces of the people he cares about. Sometime later, he finally has a massive breakthrough. By using a water mirror base and applying a complex relogic sand pattern, the device can now track moving images and beam them directly into his mind. For the first time ever, he experiences true vision, and he is overwhelmed by the beauty of the world around him. But as he's taking in the sights, he suddenly notices a giant crab standing right behind him, and he gets the distinct feeling that definitely isn't supposed to be there. Staring at that nightmare fuel crab, our boy Kunon basically says, "That sounds like a problem for future Kunon," and decides to lock in on what actually matters. This moment is a major milestone in his life, and he had already hard-coded his spell to make sure the first thing he'd do after gaining his vision would be taking a long, hard look at himself. The young noble creates a mirror and starts staring at his own reflection, but unfortunately, he realizes his face is just kind of mid, so the big reveal wasn't nearly as impactful as he was hoping for. With that out of the way, the protagonist turns back to the giant crab and asks what it's doing there. Since having a massive silent monster in his room definitely isn't normal, the creature remains silent, and for a split second the kid considers the possibility that this might be Aiko's true final form. That hypothesis is debunked a moment later when the maid herself barges into the room. Her sudden entrance jump scares him so much that he ends up stumbling right into the crab. But as he does, he realizes the monster isn't actually there. He can still see it clearly, but his hand passes right through it like it's a hologram, which is just super confusing. Aiko is also a bit baffled as to why her master is waving his arms at thin air, but then she spots the magical eyeball floating next to him and realizes he finally accomplished his impossible goal. She is incredibly happy and gives him a big hug, but she accidentally knocks the magic eye away, and all the spinning vision makes him feel like he's in a glitchy VR headset. The maid apologizes for the collision, but since this is a legendary occasion, she asks if he would like her to cook a special feast to celebrate. He likes the sound of a party, but there is still the small issue of the giant crab standing in the middle of the room. Aiko seems to have no idea it's there at all, and to make things even more bizarre, the boy sees a black horn on the maid's head. She has never mentioned having a horn before, and she doesn't seem to know it exists. He really doesn't know what to make of this weird interface, so he decides to just let it go for now and deal with it later. In the meantime, the young mage heads out to get his first true taste of the outside world. You'd think he'd be blown away by the beautiful scenery of the fields, but with his magic vision, what he sees is a bleak expanse of land with a black sun and a gloomy atmosphere. This is not what he was expecting at all, but since he's never seen the sky before, he can't tell if this is a standard setting or a total bug. The faithful maid soon joins him outside since they are about to head to the main building to inform the rest of the family, but the boy is still rather concerned because the crab is following him now. Ixio and his mother are overjoyed by the news that he can finally see, and the kid is happy to see them too. But for some reason, his brother has wings and his mother has heterochromia. They both look like high-tier characters to him, but just like with the horn, He is the only one who can see these features. A few moments later, his father comes running up the stairs because he was just informed of the breakthrough. The boy was expecting a hidden feature similar to the others, but to his absolute shock, his father looks like a walking cosmic calamity on par with an anti-spiral threat. None of them seem to have any idea about their invisible skins, so there would likely be no point talking to them about it. He decides to wait and ask Xion for advice when he gets the chance. News of the achievement soon reaches the royal castle, and the legendary mentor is informed that he has been permitted to leave the castle to visit, even though he is no longer the official instructor. Later that day, the carriage from the castle arrives, and Marika is the first to come out and greet her fiancé. She tells him she's really happy he was able to achieve his dream, and asks to see how the spell works. The student obliges and forms his magic eye, explaining that it reflects all images and transmits them directly to his brain, though his actual eyes still need to be open for the link to work. On that note, the princess notices that his eyes have been closed this entire time, so she asks him to finally take a look at her. The young mage is a little nervous because he doesn't know what his future wife is going to look like. He slowly opens his eyes and looks in her direction, and thankfully, she looks perfectly normal and as beautiful as he had imagined. She does have a random feather sticking out of her head, but that's something he can just ignore. Dario soon arrives as well to congratulate the boy, and in his eyes, the knight looks like he has a legendary sword strapped to his back. But that is nothing compared to what he sees when Xion finally arrives, because his master straight up looks like a being made of pure light. He is having a hard time looking directly at the man because he's too bright, telling the mentor that he genuinely looks like a phone screen at max brightness in the middle of the night. The boy asks his teacher to join him inside because he has something he wants to discuss in private. While they do this, Marika heads out to the garden to continue her training with Dario as usual. Inside, the protagonist informs Xion of everything that has happened since he gained his vision, including the giant crab that's following him everywhere he goes and the random features he keeps spotting on people. The legendary mage finds the whole thing hilarious, but the kid doesn't think it's funny at all because when he eventually marries Marika, he doesn't want to have to deal with a giant crab watching everything they do. In all seriousness, Xion does believe that the boy is telling the truth because the descriptions are way too vivid to be made up. He also feels flattered by the fact that he is seen as a being of light and takes a lot of pride in that. He thinks of two possibilities for the situation. One is that the magic eye might be allowing him to see the actual shape of people's souls, which is why he sees hidden features that no one else can. The student agrees that's possible, but if that's the case, then it would mean his soul is a giant crab, and he really doesn't want to accept that. Xion also suggests that it could be hallucinations brought about by intense magic sickness. He explains that in this world, there are various locations dense with magical energy, and he was once walking through such an area when he suddenly got hit with a dizzy spell. It felt as though he had downed 20 shots of vodka in one go, and he began to see dozens of immaterial creatures moving through the area with no physical form. That sounds very similar to what the boy is experiencing, but there's no way to know for sure yet. The mentor tells him they will learn more as the kid looks at more things, but until then, they have to keep working on theories to find a pattern. He also advises that the boy probably shouldn't tell anyone about the strange things he's seeing, since it would be a bad idea to draw attention to it before they figure out how it works. The prodigy agrees and is glad he chose to ask for advice, but looking directly at the glowing man still hurts his eyes. Late into the evening, Marika is done with her training, but the mages are still talking inside. Since she can't leave without Xion, she has to wait out there with Aiko. Since the boy's birthday is coming up, the princess asks the maid if she has any idea what a good gift for him would be. The maid tells her that the legendary tiny boss will be happy with anything the princess gives him, so there's no need to overthink it. A few moments later, the two men finally come outside, but as soon as Xion sees the princess, he bursts out in laughter because he can't stop imagining how funny she must look with a feather on her head. Later on, the maid is helping the kid clean out his office. He says he has already finished reading all of those books so she can just take the pile back to the main building's library. The reason he's cleaning out the space is because today is his 12th birthday, and he has officially decided to attend the magic school. That evening, the family throws a party for him and gives him all the gifts they prepared. They are happy for him, but they are also upset that he's going to be moving so far away. His mother is taking it pretty hard because she doesn't know how she will handle not having him around anymore, but he assures her that no matter how far he goes, he will always love her. Later that night, The couple is out on the balcony together. Marika asks how the preparations for his departure have been going, and he tells her he just packed a few comfortable clothes and the bare necessities. Unfortunately, she has to go to school on the day he is meant to leave, so she won't be there to say goodbye. The girl decides that this is a good time to give him the present she picked out, so she hands him a box containing a beautiful bracelet. She tells him she got a matching set for both of them, and if things ever get tough at the magic school, she wants him to speak to the bracelet as if he were talking to her, and she will do the same with hers so they won't miss each other too much. They both promise to write letters as often as possible and to wait for each other no matter how long it takes. On the day of departure, the family gathers to see him off. They are all fighting back tears, expecting him to be just as sad as they are, but the boy already got over the grief of leaving. After all, he will only be gone for 4 or 5 years, and he's excited to see what kind of high-level sorcerers he will meet at the magic school. 5 days have already slipped by, and the grind toward the Magic Academy continues as our protagonist stays on the road. His companion asks how much longer the trek will take, and the young noble explains that they have a massive journey ahead since the school is located in an entirely different kingdom. They haven't even managed to cross the borders of Hylia yet, so at this steady pace, it will likely take about a month to reach their destination. On the bright side, they are nearing the mansion of the boy's grandfather, where they can finally get some rest. However, this journey marks a major turning point because the maid drops a bombshell and explains that she cannot remain in his service forever. She has dreams of getting married and starting a family of her own, and she feels that if she doesn't make that move now, it will be a case of now or never. The little mage's heart is heavy at the thought of her leaving, so she jokes that if he wants her to stay that badly, he'd have to abandon his fiancée and marry her instead. They both know that is impossible, so they accept that this bittersweet goodbye is the only way forward. When they finally pull up to the grandfather's residence, the boy is buzzing with excitement because it has been 4 years since his last visit. He actually used a bit of strategic guilt-tripping on his parents to allow this stop because he knows the old man owns a massive library of magical grimoires, though he genuinely gets along with the guy too. The reunion is heartwarming as the grandfather comes charging outside to greet him, but the boy's soul vision makes things a bit weird because his grandpa appears to have massive demon lord horns sticking out of his head. To celebrate the enrollment, the old man offers to buy the boy absolutely anything he wants since he is incredibly loaded. His parents saw this coming from a mile away and sent a letter specifically forbidding the grandfather from spending more than $500,000 on a single gift. For those keeping track, that is about 2 or 3 months of a maid's salary, and the old man is genuinely bummed out because he was actually planning to buy the kid a whole cruise liner. After the initial greetings, the boy asks to meet his new assistant because part of this visit was meant to facilitate the handoff from his old maid. Enter Rinko, the younger sister of his current maid. She is almost a carbon copy of her sister, but she already has a fiancé of her own, which makes the older sister feel a little salty. The two sisters get along perfectly fine regardless, and Rinko admits she was nervous at first when she heard she'd be serving the son of a marquis who carries a hero's scar. After meeting him, she realizes he is a very relaxed and chill person. The older maid warns her new replacement that the boy often forgets to eat when he is deep in his magical research, so she needs to be ready with sandwiches to make sure he doesn't accidentally starve himself. After years of taking care of him, the outgoing maid admits she is going to miss him terribly, but she warns her sister not to put any naughty ideas in the young master's head because she can't stand the thought of him becoming a legendary playboy. Rinko wasn't exactly planning on turning the kid into a pimp named Slickback, but she promises to be careful about what he is exposed to. Still, she points out that since he is kind, talented, and handsome, he is probably going to be swarmed by women the second he steps onto campus and might become a womanizer all on his own. The older maid refuses to believe her little master would ever do such a thing, and they end up in a heated argument while they finish making his sandwiches. The boy, meanwhile, is completely oblivious to the fact that they were debating his future as a player. The next morning, it is time for the final departure, and the old maid knocks on his door for one last wake-up call. Since she won't be joining the rest of the trip, this might be the last time they see each other for a while. It is a heavy moment as the boy tells her he will miss her, especially since he is heading into an unfamiliar place, but he promises he will be fine on his own. They share a final hug before he and Rinko set off for the academy. During the ride, he asks his new assistant if she is really okay with this arrangement since she will be away from her fiancé for 6 or 7 years. She assures him it is all part of the plan to save up money for a restaurant they want to open together. A few days later, they stop in a city to catch their breath, and the new maid is stunned by the amount of magic shops lining the streets. The boy spots a fascinating book in a shop window and decides to investigate. He hasn't had much access to rare books lately, so he is intrigued. But when his assistant tells him to just buy it if he wants it that bad, he points out he'd be broke instantly because the price tag is $5 million. That kind of money could buy a whole restaurant chain, but the price makes sense to the boy since most high-level magic books are one-of-a-kind treasures that cost a fortune. The store owner overhears the conversation and asks if the boy is a student from the magic school. He explains he is an applicant who hasn't officially enrolled yet, and the woman is so delighted to meet a real mage that she asks for a demonstration. Since she was polite about it, he agrees and uses his water magic to create a tiny, detailed cat right in the palm of her hand. The woman is amazed because she is just a magic enthusiast who can't use spells herself. She tells him he is lucky to have met her, but warns him that the competition this year is intense because the Saint of the Holy Kingdom is enrolling, along with legendary figures like the Inferno Prince and the Lightning Bolt from the New Kingdom. The owner is in such a good mood that she offers him a discounted grimoire written by the legendary Xeon, but the boy turns her down. His assistant is shocked that he would pass up such a huge discount on an expensive book, but he simply explains that buying it would be useless since he was the one who helped Xeon write the thing in the first place. Next, they visit a fabric store where the boy immediately starts touching every material he can find. The owner assumes he is some spoiled noble and yells at him to keep his grubby fingers off the rare goods, but the kid explains he just wanted to feel the texture. After learning a specific material is dark fox fur, the boy casually manifests a water-based dark fox that looks and feels exactly like the real thing. The owner is stunned by the level of detail, and the boy apologizes, explaining that he needs to collect as many texture samples as possible to make his magical creations as accurate as possible. The owner's intrusive thoughts get the better of him, and he asks if the boy can recreate the texture of thick thighs. The maid immediately scolds the man for such a vulgar question, though the boy admits he actually tried that once with his old maid and got yelled at for it. As they are dragged out of the store, the saint and her friends happen to walk in and see the man holding the magical fox. She thinks it is real and tries to touch it, but accidentally destroys the spell, causing the water to splash all over the man's crotch. The saint is embarrassed, but fascinated by the residue. So she and her entourage ask the shopkeeper to stand still while they examine the magic. The poor man has no choice but to stand there as teenage girls poke at his junk in the middle of his own store, which definitely wasn't on his bucket list for the day. Finally, the duo arrives at the magic school to check into the dorms, only to find out the place is completely full. The receptionist, a woman named Lubel, informs them that students were supposed to apply for housing months in advance. Xeon never mentioned a word about that, so now they have nowhere to sleep. They consider a hotel, but the long-term cost is too high, so they decide to rent a house instead. Thanks to a list provided by the helpful receptionist, they manage to find a place by the end of the day. Meanwhile, deep within the academy, a list of this year's applicants is presented to a mysterious figure sitting in a pitch-black room. They seem to have a very specific interest in the boy's file for some reason. The next day, it is time for the entry exam, but the assistant is told she has to stay behind. She tries to bribe the receptionist to let her in, but it doesn't work, so she has to wait outside while her master enters the testing area. As he stands among the other applicants, everyone is staring in confusion because our hero is wearing a mysterious eye mask. Our protagonist isn't about to fly blind, so he conjures his magic eye to get a high-definition look at his competition. He notices that everyone has their own unique hidden features, but his interest is piqued by a specific girl who seems special even among this elite group. He walks right up to her and asks if she is the famous saint from the Holy Kingdom, which she confirms, though she is baffled as to why this random boy in a mask is talking to her. He explains that he is fascinated because she is the first light element magician he has ever seen, and he wants to soak up as much knowledge as possible. The saint isn't exactly impressed, and tells him there is no point in talking because she believes light magic is the ultimate element, meaning a lowly water mage has nothing to learn from her. That claim actually causes a bit of a stir, because the other students look at her like she's crazy, since there is no official hierarchy that puts one type of magic above the rest. She realizes she might have been tripping and apologizes, explaining that she was just repeating the propaganda they fed her at the temple. While she has everyone's attention, she drops a warning that she lacks most normal human emotions due to the hero's scars she inherited, so she might accidentally offend them without meaning to. When our boy hears this, he gets hyped because he realizes they are both dealing with inherited conditions, suggesting they could become disabled besties. The saint has no idea how to react to that vibe, but the conversation is cut short when the professor in charge of the exam shows up. Our hero takes a scan of Professor Saf and realizes the man is incredibly powerful. He also notices Professor Safi, though her hidden feature is a bit underwhelming since she just has a bunch of rats swarming at her feet. After the introduction, both professors drop a massive plot twist by congratulating all four of them on their enrollment before the test even starts, and the kids are shocked. But Saf explains that at this academy, you are pretty much guaranteed a spot as long as you are a sorcerer. The saint is confused because she heard the exam was legendary for being difficult, but the professor admits they just say that to boost the school's prestige and make it seem more competitive. Since all four applicants have exceptionally rare magic crests, there was never any doubt they would be admitted. Our protagonist feels a little robbed because he studied like a maniac to pass, but the professor assures him that the test still matters. It turns out there are 3 different tracks at the school: fundamentals for the newbies, teacher-assisted for regular students, and independent research for the absolute units. That 3rd level is the dream because it means your skills are so advanced you are free to do whatever you want as long as you don't break the law. The professor warns that the advanced class is only for top-tier mages, and graduating from it is a nightmare, but our boy is just excited to see what kind of challenge they have prepared. The first part of the assessment is a practical test, where each student has to step forward, reveal their crest rank, and show off their spell count. First up is Hank, who reveals a 2-star fire crest and a repertoire of 7 spells. He demonstrates a fire path spell, and while it seems basic, our hero is impressed because the flames follow a path laid out by Hank's energy, giving it endless strategic potential. Hank leaves a spiral pattern burned into the grass, and the professors move on to the next candidate, a boy named Rhea. He sports a 2-star wind crest and can use 8 different spells. Rhea warns everyone to back off because his magic is destructive, then gathers a massive amount of energy and fires a wind blast at the ground. This intermediate-level spell draws power from the sky to create a violent gust, which really catches our hero's eye. Next is Reyes, who reveals a 3-star light crest and a maximum of 5 spells. Since nobody is hurt, she can't show off her healing magic, so she fires a beam of light attack instead. Our boy is stunned because an attack at the speed of light is basically impossible to dodge unless you move before she even casts it. Finally, it is our protagonist's turn. He steps up and reveals a 2-star water crest, but he admits he only knows 2 spells, the water ball and the bubble spell. Saf is surprised, especially since he was told to make this specific test extra difficult. He explains that he received 2 heavy-hitting recommendation letters for the boy, one from the Grand Mage of Hylia and another from Zion. The other students are floored that the kid in the mask is connected to such legendary mages. It turns out Safi has a bit of a grudge against Zion, which explains why she has been acting so hostile toward our boy. Since Zion was the one who asked for the difficulty to be cranked up, our hero accepts the challenge. Saf conjures a wind barrier around himself and tells the boy he has to find a way to defeat him. The other students think it's an impossible task because elementary water magic should just get repelled by the wind, but our boy just looks disappointed that the challenge isn't harder. He can't afford to lose his cool in front of the saint, so he starts spawning dozens of bubbles around Saf. The professor is impressed by the quantity, but thinks it's a waste of time since they can't pierce the barrier. That is when our hero pulls a pro gamer move, multiplying the bubbles until they turn red and create a swirling vortex around the windshield. He then casually summons a water chair, sits down, and explains that the battle is already over. He can keep this vortex going for 2 days straight, and since Saf is eating through his mana to keep the wind barrier up, the professor is going to run out of gas in half a day at most. Saf has to admit he's been outplayed and concedes the match. As soon as the bubbles vanish, our boy goes right back to pestering Reyes to show him more of her light magic, even trying to invite her on a parfait date, but she shuts him down instantly. Saf has to step in and tell the kid to stop flirting because it is time for the interviews. While the others are called one by one, our hero chats with Saf about wind magic. He explains that if there had been a time limit on the test, he would have tried to fuse his bubbles with the wind barrier to take control of Saf's spell from the inside out. Saf has never heard of such a crazy technique, but the boy's gut tells him that water is the most versatile element because it can penetrate almost anything. Finally, it is time for the boy's interview, and Safi leads him to a room that his magic senses can't even penetrate. She describes the room as looking like nighttime inside and offers to lead him in, but he assures her he'll be fine and walks into the darkness alone. For the first time in forever, he is truly blind because even his magic eye is forcibly dispelled inside the room. He finds himself surrounded by 7 mysterious figures, and one of them approaches, mentioning she used to be Xion's master. Our boy immediately tells her to back off because he has a fiancé and doesn't want other women getting too close. The figure is confused since she heard he was just flirting with Reyes, but he clarifies that was just for research purposes. She asks if he learned anything new, and he geeks out about the amazing magic he saw from his peers, planning to incorporate their styles into his own arsenal as soon as he gets home. The mysterious woman is satisfied and places him in the advanced class, which makes him incredibly happy. She even hints that she might take him on as a personal student if he does well, but before she can finish her pitch, our hero just walks out because he isn't interested in listening to the rest. Even though the rejection stung a bit, the figure is excited because she noticed him trying to use a completely original, albeit incomplete spell the second he walked in, and she can't wait to see what he does next. Everything kicks off back at our protagonist's family estate, where his parents have just received a letter from Rinko containing the latest updates. The news that the little genius officially passed the entrance exam and secured a spot in the elite advanced class leaves them both swelling with pride, but the atmosphere shifts instantly when they keep reading. The maid mentions that the boy might have gotten a bit too carried away during the test, literally painting the academy lawn red with the blood of his opponents. The father immediately loses his cool, fuming at the idea that his son has already started causing massive trouble on his very first day of school. He even considers cutting the boy's allowance for a month as a harsh penalty, but they soon discover that the school has a strictly hardcore rule. Advanced class students are forbidden from receiving any financial support from their families. When this bombshell drops on the elite students in the classroom, a wave of genuine concern spreads through the group. No one there expected the academy to demand they figure out how to earn their own living just to keep their research going. Reyes is the first to speak up, and she does not hide her indignation, standing her ground against Professor Saf and calling the rule completely unacceptable. The master questions what the problem is, and the girl explains that she came here specifically to research magic, so she doesn't have the time or energy to figure out how to make ends meet. The professor doesn't budge and makes it clear that the goal of that class is to produce top-tier mages, and he believes that no one can truly be considered the best unless they know how to sustain themselves in the real world. This is a crushing blow for the girl, considering her lifestyle costs about $1.5 million per month, not to mention she has to bankroll the salaries of 2 maids who also serve as her personal bodyguards. After that cold shower of reality, the group is led to the private labs that they will be using for their individual research projects. With the weight of being officially broke hanging over her shoulders, the saint gets nervous and asks Professor Safi if they are going to be charged for the use of that workspace. The instructor clarifies that the lab itself is a free perk, but every single research material must be paid for out of their own pockets. Furthermore, they have total freedom to work hard or slack off as much as they want. But if they don't accumulate enough credits by the end of the semester through achievements approved by a professor, they will be demoted back to the regular class. While the others are sweating bullets, our little noble is feeling pretty chill. He is already sitting on a mountain of money from the royalties of his publications with Xion, and if things get tight, he's confident he can make a killing as a magic engineer. He even tries to take advantage of the moment to invite Reyes to discuss the future over some parfaits, but he gets shut down instantly. Later that evening, the young man is back at his place looking a bit deflated, and Rinko notices that something is definitely bothering him. He admits he's feeling sad because the girl of his dreams keeps rejecting his invitations no matter how many times he tries to be smooth. The maid decides to drop some high-level advice, telling him that he needs to know when to back off because being too pushy is just rude and will only serve to push the princess even further away. He takes the lecture to heart, and when she asks if he'll actually be able to pay her salary now that he's cut off from his allowance, he reassures her that his savings are more than enough to handle the bill, which makes the assistant feel a lot more relieved. While our protagonist is currently winning at life, Reyes is living through a total nightmare. She tries to have dinner with her maids, but since it was confirmed that she can't even receive food from her family, the situation has become critical. One of the maids tries to be supportive and says she's willing to work without pay for a while, but she takes it back seconds later because she actually really needs that money to survive. Normally, a mage in this position would just sell their healing services, but the church strictly forbids her from using her holy magic for personal profit, which leaves her completely backed into a corner. The next morning, the girl drags herself to school looking like a literal zombie after staying up all night trying to solve her financial crisis. As she walks through the halls, she notices a massive line of students forming in front of our boy's lab. She discovers that the genius has just launched a business that is an absolute hit. The kid created a sleep sanctuary, filling his lab with his famous magic waterbeds. Since everyone at the academy is constantly exhausted from their intense research, people are literally lining up to pay for an hour of high-quality sleep. The business is doing so well that even Professor Saf and Safi show up to check out the hype and walk away thoroughly impressed. The master even offers the boy more lab space and in exchange asks that the professors be allowed to pay for the service too, since every single faculty member is suffering from chronic insomnia. With the business officially sanctioned and booming, the money starts rolling in by the bucket load. However, the success also catches the eyes of 3 mysterious girls who have been spying on the boy because of his legendary connection to Xeon. Meanwhile, the saint hits rock bottom when the power at her house is cut off for non-payment, and she finds herself forced to eat what she calls air sandwiches. Her maid suggests she should ask the protagonist for some business advice, and even though she thinks he's a total weirdo, she realizes she doesn't have any other choice if she doesn't want to starve. The next day, a humbled Reyes goes to meet the hero to beg for help. She fears he might demand something terrible in return, but the boy shows he is a true gentleman and guarantees he would never take advantage of a friend's vulnerability. He even calls Professor Safi in to act as a witness and keep everything strictly professional. The young man suggests she open a healing business, but after learning about the church's annoying rules, he pivots the strategy. He discovers there are no restrictions on using purification magic for profit and proposes they develop a magic item together. Safi warns them about the headache of shared patent rights, so our protagonist, with incredible generosity, decides to let Reyes be the project lead so she can keep the lion's share of the profit and fix her life. He calls in a favor from Professor Surya, a light mage who is a loyal customer of his sleep sanctuary, and she brings over some rare shishula seeds. These plants are sacred and extremely valuable, but they normally only grow on holy land. The boy has a theory that Reyes can simulate that soil by using her holy sanctum spell. The experiment is a total success, and the seeds sprout instantly. Seeing his master so ecstatic over the research data, the girl finally realizes that he wasn't just a boring flirt. He is actually a massive magic nerd obsessed with her element. Of course, he doesn't miss the chance to drop a flirty comment during the report, asking if she has finally fallen in love with him, which she denies with a quick blush. The young man reveals that he invested $1 million of his own money into those seeds, accepting the risk of losing everything just to help her out. The saint is genuinely grateful, and with the help of the boy's bubble magic, they refine the herbs into medicinal pills and secure a contract worth $2 million per batch. To celebrate, the hero treats her and her maids to a luxury lunch, but he ends up taking a financial hit of $220,000 because the bodyguards decided to order the most expensive wines on the menu. The boy learns a valuable lesson about not giving total freedom when offering a freebie. Back at the lab, he finds Hank and Rhea desperate for financial help, and agrees to assist them in exchange for using them as test subjects for fire-based cooking experiments and flight tests. Meanwhile, over at the sleep sanctuary, the 3 spies run into each other and realize they are all hunting the exact same target. So that's how the episode ends, and honestly, our protagonist just gave a masterclass on how to be a criminal genius, an angel investor, and a total magic nerd all at the same time. Did you guys enjoy it and want to see the continuation? Then let me know in the comments that you want the next part. Smash that like button and the hype to strengthen this video, and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single update.